Great.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Encourage Theory, a podcast experience where we encourage, enlighten, and inspire you to create the life that you want. I'm your host, Tiffany Blackman, and today we're going to talk about courage with a special guest all the way from Cali. We'll talk a bit about her journey as a runner, an author, among other things, I'm sure. Let's talk more about how we can draw on courage and where to begin. So be sure to listen to the entire episode and get the details about how to connect. Let's get started. Well, hello, Dorina. So good to have you. I am so excited. Oh my gosh.
Hi,
So,
Tiffany.
so you are fresh off of a run, yeah?
Yes, actually, I ran a half marathon on Saturday. So I'm in the recovery days where I'm trying to take care of my body.
Oh my gosh, I totally get that. Now, I myself am not a runner, but I have relationships with runners, and I definitely know that there's like a ramp up phase and a cool down phase. So you're in cool down.
Yes, for sure. Trying to
Oh,
trying
that's
to
so
nourish
awesome.
well.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Okay, so you answered a call when I asked for guests on my podcast, and I feel like it's important to tell the backstory of how we kind of met. So, it all got started online. I'm wondering if you want to tell a little bit to the listeners about how we met.
Okay, well, you're gonna have to remind me. Actually,
Okay.
did did we
Yeah.
meet?
So you remember the Entrusted Women's Group?
Yes. I was going to say, did we meet through Entrusted Women? I think we
Yeah.
did. And if just for the listeners, this is an amazing group of women. And it is women, all for women of color who are communicators. And I feel so privileged to be part of this group. I've just joined in the last year. The just leader and founder is Kia Stevens, and she just had a heart for bringing together women from all different spaces and to really support women of color who have a message to share, and really for us to just cheer each other on, pray for each other, and inspire each other. And so when I saw your call and what your podcast was about, I was so excited, Tiffany, and I'm just grateful to be included as you are launching this amazing project.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad that I joined Entrusted Women back in 2018. I would not have met women like you. Like this is so amazing. So actually I was referred to Entrusted Woman by a friend and an author. It kind of trickled down through the line of another blogger that was taking a list of women of color communicators. And this group has been such a tremendous resource and a blessing for me, really, as I navigate my speaking business and being an aspiring author myself. It's coming, y'all. But the group has actually been such an encouragement and has emboldened me in many ways, including starting this podcast, because I didn't know the first steps of starting a podcast. So I wouldn't have been able to reach out to you. I wouldn't have known what to do. But they have trainings that actually teach during their conferences and in the group how to do this and how to resource and connect with other women. So it has been such a blessing. So shout out to Entrusted Women.
Yes.
Got to put that in there because that's how we met. So cool. All right, Dorina, you are so many things. You are a mother, you're a runner, you're an author, like several books, an author. And in your new release, Walk, Run, Soar, you encourage folks to focus on and improve their physical health as well as their spiritual health. So when did you start running and why did you start running?
Well, it's kind of a fun story. I actually started running when I was a little girl. My dad was a runner and I was a soccer player. So I already kind of had that endurance in my bones, played soccer from the time I was, I don't even know, probably 5 years old. And my dad invited me to do a race with him. I think it was third grade, and we did a 10K race. And so if listeners don't know, it's a 6 mile race. So my daddy and I, we trained together, and To be honest, the most important part for me was just being able to spend time with him. But
Mhm.
as we would run, he would teach me about pacing myself. He would teach me words like stamina, and he would encourage me to keep running and, not slow down even the times when I was feeling tired. I grew up in the south side of Chicago, and so we were doing this race that was in our neighborhood, the Beverly Morgan Park neighborhood, and this was called the Ridge Run. And so it was just a nice course that went around this kind of winding drive that had all these beautiful houses and people from the neighborhood who would come out and cheer for us. So it was just my first experience. And then I kind of got the bug and continued running throughout grade school and high school. Then I joined the
Oh,
track and
that's
field
awesome.
team. And then in college, just started doing a little bit more longer distance races.
Yeah. Oh, man. Parents can instill so much in children just by wanting to show them a skill set or spend time with them, just encouraging them. So that is so awesome to hear that it's all started with your dad.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, that's awesome. So running for you has become something that is not only a passion of yours, but something that's like a really intimate experience, right? Like, I know that oftentimes in life we experience circumstances that can either propel us one of two ways, either towards hope and courage, much like what your father instilled in you, or towards discouragement and fear, really. So, was there ever a time when you actually stopped running or paused running, and what encouraged you to start again?
Yeah, this actually is a little bit of a difficult story of something that happened in my life 6 years ago. I was married to a man named Eric Lee, and he and I actually were working together in ministry. We had a nonprofit organization in Haiti. So we were connecting resources between people here in the US and California, especially, and Haiti. And I was a director of a jewelry business, a fair trade jewelry business. So we had employed 60 artisans in the northern mountains of Haiti
Wow.
and trying to provide jobs for them. So that's a little context on our life. At the time, our daughters were ages 2, 5, and 8.
Mm.
And so we kind of felt like we were in the sweet spot. My husband was turning 40 that year, and we had so many things filling our calendar squares. We were just excited about what lie ahead. And everything kind of came to this screeching halt in May of that year. My husband had gone to do some testing, and they actually ended up finally diagnosing him as having stage 4 cancer, melanoma
Whoa.
cancer. And it was really like, felt it came like out of left field for us. It was
Hmm.
something we weren't expecting. He was a very healthy guy. He was an athlete. And like I said, we were in this sweet spot with our ministry. So we kind of, you know, just were shell shocked when we got that diagnosis. And during that season, then that summer, obviously I had to stop everything that I was doing and just focus on caring for my husband and for my girls. So that was a season where I stopped running, and that was just out of necessity because I was his caregiver around the clock.
Hmm.
His body actually deteriorated very quickly, and he ended up going to heaven in September of that year. So just 3 months later, after we received that diagnosis.
Wow.
And honestly, Tiffany, in that season, I didn't think I could run again. He
Hmm.
had always been my running partner. He was my coach. He had always pushed our girls in the jogging stroller, and it felt so painful to try to go and do that thing knowing that he was absent.
Yeah.
But I knew that, running was a part of who I was even before I met Eric Lee, and it was a healing thing for me. And so, with the encouragement of some of my girlfriends who invited me to go out running with them again, I did get out there again. And what I found, sometimes that first step is the hardest one, but what I found was that in that place of running, I really was able to meet with God. I was able
Hmm.
to cry out to him with my questions and my doubts and my fears about the future. And he just ministered to me in that place when I was out running with him. It was like I would go for these long runs, and it was the only time I was really away from my children.
Hmm.
And it afforded me that time to meet with a savior.
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh. Uh, I feel like we find ourselves in these moments where we absolutely have to like halt whatever we're doing, like I can't even imagine um husband passing away. I myself am a divorcee, and I've experienced death, much like anyone else, but I have not experienced the closeness of a spouse or a parent. And I feel like those are some very heavy weights to carry.
Mhm.
And to hear you talk about your story of how you actually like came back from that, there's this common theme of like I had friends that cared deeply for me that said, "Hey, let's go run." Same thing with the Entrusted Women's Group. It's like, "Hey, Chica, let's go run." Like,
Mhm.
what did God put in you? Let's go do it. So I feel like that part is so refreshing to know that our lives are literally partially dictated by who we surround ourselves with, right?
So
And that
true.
helps.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, that helps us to get back up when we need that effort that sometimes we can't even draw from ourselves. Um, I think oftentimes people underestimate how we need to care for our spiritual health in the midst of circumstances that are happening, right? Like you could have kept running, just by default, right? Like,
Hmm.
I think a lot of times we end up doing that. People don't take the time to process, they don't take the time to heal, they keep running,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it's easy at times to lose our faith or courage, even if we don't keep God's promises written on our hearts, written in our minds. So I know personally, I've been a Christian from a super young age, like since third grade, and I'm a self proclaimed blessed kid right here. That's how I got to and from church. It's how I developed my church family. And I find so much of my life revolving around the courage that God has given me, and what He says about courage in His Word. So for me personally, I cling to a family scripture. It's in Isaiah 54, and it says, "Do not be afraid. You will not be put to shame. Do not fear disgrace. You will not be humiliated. You will forget the shame of your youth and remember no more the reproach of your widowhood. For the Maker is your husband. The Lord Almighty is his name." And I'm constantly reminded, about what the word says about the steps of the righteous being ordered by the Lord. That's in Psalms 37. And these scriptures remind me about courage regardless of circumstances surrounding me, and how God gives me new courage every single day. And when the
Hmm.
word talks about mercies being new from God every single day, that to me talks directly to renewed courage, and how to have it. So tell me a little bit about like your reliance on God in those moments for new courage every single day.
Well, I absolutely love that you just quoted Isaiah 54 because that passage has been very meaningful to me. And I feel like as I was a young widow, I was 37 when my husband died. I clung to that specific passage.
Mm-hmm.
And it was God's reminder to me that he was going to be my maker. He was the creator, the one who created me uniquely. He chose me to be his daughter, but he also is going to be my husband. And it talks about that in Isaiah 54. And I saw that verse with new light, of course, when my husband was gone. And so that was my prayer every day. And at the times when I did not have courage or I felt discouraged, just clinging to that idea that, okay, God, you said you were going to be my husband. Will you be my husband in this moment? And so, for example, there were times when I had to go to like the parent teacher conferences for my girls and I was on my own, or just doing even things around my house that my husband had done for years graciously for me, taking out the garbage or changing the air filter, doing the dishes, some of those things where I would start to feel that kind of resentment or fear or frustration that would rise up inside of me. And then just clinging to that verse and saying, okay, Lord, give me courage, give me
Mm,
discernment. You said you would be my husband. So be my partner right now. Help me to be creative in how I deal with these children. Help me to
mm-hmm,
be patient, all of that. And so I feel like that was the place where he continued to renew me, is just recognizing that I didn't have to do it on my own. I didn't have to pull up my bootstraps, as they say. I had to actually just reach out my hand and say, okay, Lord, will you be my husband?
mm-hmm. Oh, that's so that's so good. And you talk too about this like concept in your book about cultivating courage and about God giving us internal courage that we can really rely on. And I think you quoted Joshua 1. Yeah, talk to us a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another one of my favorite scriptures, Joshua 1, and specifically verse 9, where he says, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And so, one of my devotionals in the book is about cultivating courage and realizing that no matter what we do in life, we need to have courage. But a lot of times, like I was talking about before, we think, oh, well, we've got to muster it up. We've got to
Mm,
bring it up in ourselves, or we have to say these certain words to ourselves or to each other that are going to somehow make us be brave. But the reality is that courage is a character quality of God.
mm,
And so, if we want to have courage, we need that to come from the Lord, not from ourselves. And so, here in Joshua, just a little bit of context, the Lord is saying to Joshua, who is one of his warriors who he is about to send out, he's saying, be strong and courageous. And he's encouraging Joshua. And Joshua served Moses, during Israel's 40 years when they were wandering in the wilderness. So Joshua had this great model in Moses. And even in that, Joshua needed to have courage to go into that promised land because he didn't have Moses anymore. And so it's just a reminder to all of us that, even this brave warrior Joshua, he needed God to remind him, not just once, but multiple times, to be strong and courageous.
yeah.
And God continues to follow up with those similar words that we can cling to as well.
Oh, that's so good. It's so good. I felt it so many times in my Christian life where it's just like, okay, like beautiful little reminders from God, like, it's okay. I got this. We got this. I got this. I got you.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm wondering a little bit about the type of advice that you would give to someone on the cusp of either giving up or starting new. Like,
Mm.
what kind of encouragement would you give to someone in that position? I know myself, I've been in that spot so many times, whether it was right after divorce or a job not working out and having to figure out something new, or sometimes it's just the tough spot of starting something that you're not even familiar with. I mean, you're a new wife, you're a new mom, all these different things that we deal with. But sometimes, especially in the moments of discouragement that folks face, where it's like, oh man, I thought that I had it all figured out. I thought that this was going to work out and it didn't. Like, what kind of advice would you give someone when it concerns that?
Well, you know what? Honestly, whether it's in running or life, it is the first step that is always the hardest,
Mm-hmm.
because we build up all those things in our minds and in our hearts. We have a whole committee that's talking to us and trying to hold us back. And it's really getting to that first step where we start, whether it's walking or running or climbing, whatever God is calling us to. And so I think about that even as I'm training. I live here in Central California, and it is very hot during the summertime. So we have triple digits for, weeks.
Uh,
And I learned when I first moved here that if I didn't get up early in the morning to get out there and run, that I was going to pay for it. Because if you go running at like 10 o'clock and it's already, in the 80s, pushing 90s, it is going to be way harder than if you got out early. And so that was a little bit of inspiration for me to get myself out of bed and to take that
Hmm.
first step. And so even though I am not by nature a morning person, I've kind of taught myself to be a morning person just by nature of the circumstances. And so I think it's kind of that idea of showing up matters. And
Hmm.
I talk about that in my devotional that, sometimes we feel like, oh man, I'm not trained enough, or I'm not in shape, or I've got this little flab over here because I'm getting older, and we're just so caught up in all of that. But what is the most important thing is that we show up,
Hmm.
because when we show up, actually that is the movement forward. And so that's my encouragement to people, is to show up, to take that first step. Even if you don't have the whole path before you, even if you don't have the GPS of, what the next 5 turns are going to be, God's going to meet us there. And so when we take that step with Him by our side, we don't have to worry about all the details of what it's going to look like. And in fact, that's the place where He strengthens us, because we are waiting upon Him.
That's so good. I absolutely agree. It's that first step. You got to just take it, right? You got to be bold enough, courageous enough to just take it. So I know that it took some courage for you to put yourself out there and write books. So tell me a little bit about what kind of courage it took to write about your experiences in life, and to be brave enough not only to do that, but to hand off that same courage that you had to get in order to give it to others.
Well, Tiffany, I have this little phrase that I use a lot, and that's that I believe we are called to be glory chasers.
Mm,
And what that means really is that we are called to chase after God's glory, not our own glory. And so if we are seeking and pursuing God's glory, and even if we are pointing others to God's glory, that's really kind of our job description in being here on earth. And so for me, it is hard to share the vulnerable parts of my story. It's hard to share the pain. Even the way that I'm wired, I'm a person who loves to be positive and enthusiastic and encouraging. And so sometimes sharing about those dark places or those seasons where I really struggled or questioned God, it's difficult to do that. But
yeah.
I believe in the power of vulnerability.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I believe that when I am willing to be vulnerable and go first, that it's actually a gift of encouragement to others, because it helps them to say, okay, this is normal, or this is okay, or it's okay to not feel okay, or for me to struggle in this place is not, I'm not by myself. This is something that Dorina and others have experienced. And so that's part of what gives me the courage to do it, is
Hmm.
because I believe that God called me to do it. He called me to share His story and to give Him glory through it. And when I get to do that, then I get to also be a part of someone else's story and
Hmm.
see how that encourages them. And for me, just seeing that growth and development in other people is just hugely satisfying, and just to see God at work in their lives.
Oh, I agree so so wholeheartedly. Oh my gosh, yeah. This that's amazing. I know that I have found in each new endeavor, I have had to use courage to get through that thing. Like from being a mom, a paid speaker, a trainer, an entrepreneur, like anything in between, have absolutely had to rely on that. It's been it's been such an amazing time chatting with you. I don't know about you folks, but I'm feeling extremely encouraged right now. Absolutely. So, for our listeners, I want to make this extremely easy. How can they follow you, follow your story, hear more about it, or get a copy of your book, Walk, Run, and Soar?
Thank you, Tiffany. Probably the easiest way is for them to just go to my website. It's dorinagilmore.com. And there on my website, there's links to my books, and people can read my blog. I also have a podcast that I started recently with my new husband,
Oh,
Sean.
great.
And so people can connect to our podcast, hear a little bit more about our glory story and how God brought us together there. And I'm definitely on the social media, channels as well. Instagram is a place where I like to hang out most often.
Okay, great. Well, I think that I've had the opportunity to thumb through your book a little bit here and there, and I really enjoy some of the phrases that you use in your book. I remember reading one, and it just said something like, "Sometimes in life, courage is really standing at the intersection of fear and faith, and choosing faith." And it's such a huge testament about how you've really allowed God to use your story and your experience to help glean those life lessons and pass them on to others. So, even though I haven't read your devotional all the way through, I would definitely encourage my listeners, if you are a walker, a runner, or even on a mission to get healthy physically, exercising, working out, this book is such a great companion read and devotional for you. And they have so there's these like really cool faith steps and inspirations and daily goal trackers at the end of each chapter too, which I think is like the coolest because I'm a very visual person and I'm very hands-on. So like you got everything right there. No compatible journal, there's spot to journal right in there. And so I'm sure it'll be such a blessing to you while you're trying to meet some of your physical and spiritual goals. And I absolutely encourage you to check out Dorina either on social media. Again, that's DorinaGilmore.com or on IG at Dorina Gilmore and snag a copy of her latest book, Walk, Run, Soar. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dorina, on the Encourage Theory podcast. You have been such a blessing. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Tiffany. It's been a joy to just chat with you, and you've encouraged my spirit as well.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Mutual exchange. I love it. All right. Well, if you have enjoyed this episode, please comment and let us know. Rate it, share it, subscribe. If you've enjoyed the episode, make sure that you're passing it along. Please share it with your friends or family. And sometimes encouragement can be that simple. Thank you so much for joining us and stay tuned for the next episode of Encourage Theory.